Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you, Beth?
I'm doing well, thanks. Um, I watched Esme, My Love the other day, and I absolutely loved it.
Awesome. Thank
Uh,
you for watching.
of course, of course. Is it all right if I jump right in with my questions?
Sure.
All right. So you are credited as the director of photography for this film. What exactly does that mean?
Sometimes it's also called cinematographer. The terms are interchangeable. The DP is basically collaborates with the director to come up with and create the look of the film. Um, it's, to me, it's about digging into whose perspective is this, whose scene is this, what are the emotional beats, and then finding ways to express that with shot choice, camera positioning, camera movement, lighting, color, texture.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Um, how did you get into this line of work?
I was really into both theater and photography in high school. And when it came time to apply to undergrad programs, I realized that cinema was the two combined pretty much. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. Um, so I went to film school for undergrad, and luckily I was right that that's what I wanted to do with my life professionally. So yeah, I, went to undergrad, shot my friends' films, started working as a camera assistant and then a lighting technician, worked my way up to gaffer, which is the head of lighting, the head lighting technician, sort of the lighting designer, if you will. Um, and after about 8 years, decided to shift to DPing because it was always my end goal.
Very cool. So, how did you come to be a part of Esme, My Love?
So Corey and I actually went to undergrad film school together. We knew each other from back then. We even wound up being roommates, I think, senior year. And we've been good friends ever since. And when he, yeah, asked if I'd be interested in working on this film, I knew it would be a challenging production, but he's my friend, so of course I said yes, and we brought it to fruition together.
Awesome. Um, what was it like working with Corey and with the very, very small cast?
Yeah, working with Corey, I mean, Corey and I had done smaller projects together, but never really as director DP. So that was, we sort of had to find a new way to communicate because we weren't communicating as friends or even as like producer and what, it was like it's a more tight collaboration between the director and a DP. Um, So sometimes it was challenging because we almost had to like set aside the way we're used to talking to each other and have the whole new lexicon of like really digging into shots and specifics. And Corey is a master of sound. He's a sound designer. So, he came at it, and you've watched the film. So he, you probably realize that the sound design is like a huge part of the film. It's like it's so important. It's really good. Um, but sometimes he was explaining his audio vision. We don't have a word for it in English. Was he was imagining the audio of it, and that's not my skill. And
Mm.
I was imagining the visual of it, and that's not his skill. So we found a way to sort of like get them to become cohesive. And the cast, it was really cool having such a small cast because they're in every scene, and I really got to know them really well. Not like you would when you have an ensemble cast. It
Mm.
was also a really small crew. We were in upstate New York in the woods, so yeah, we all got to work really closely together. It was cool.
That's awesome. Um, so when you are working with the director, is it kind of like what the director says goes, or do you get to kind of input your own creative, I guess, voice?
Hmm. It's very much a collaboration. I mean, it's the balance is different depending on who the director and the DP are and what their their experiences and their relationship is. But I know some directors, come into a feature film with a storyboard and it's ready to go. But typically, my experience working on narrative has been that the director and I collaborate on coming up with the shot list, and really collaborate the whole way through. And that's also true of working with the production designer. All the it takes so many people to make a movie that I've rarely been in a situation where anyone isn't welcoming of input and ideas from collaborators.
That's great. That's great. Um, so in the like pre-production of all of this, when you are starting the collaborative process, how did you and Corey kind of approach filming this? Because it has a very specific style.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly it's just two characters, but from the beginning, Corey wanted the woods around them to sort of feel like a third character, because the location is very important. It's the mother Hannah is bringing them there to connect with their family history, so it had to have this like heavy sense of history and mood and sort of a spooky tone. Um, so we very much approached it with picking locations that looked great, that had a presence, that spoke for themselves, and places where we could back the camera up and show how small these people were. To give it some breathing room, because oftentimes we're like very in there with the both of them and very dramatic, and then we needed times to step back and have them feel the awe that they're feeling um, in this location. Um, other That was a big part of the approach, and another was, I like to do a pass of the script where I just note emotional beats and ask the director questions. Like whose scene is this? Whose perspective is this really? And we sort of realized that the first half of the film is a mother Hannah's perspective, and then it shifts at some point to Esme's, the daughter's perspective, when she kind of has to take on the adult role. So yeah, there's a major part of our approach is choosing camera angles that place us within sort of how Hannah sees the world at the beginning, and then shifts to how Esme is seeing the world.
That's very interesting. I did notice a bit of a shift, but like I'm not well versed in cinematography or really anything in this industry. So once you said like the shift in perspective, it's like, okay, makes sense now.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and hopefully it is not, I don't want to take the audience out of it. I don't want that choice to make the audience think like, wow, look at what they did in filmmaking. Hopefully it does just sort of hit you on just an emotional level.
Yeah, it does. Um, and mirrors play a large role in the film as well. How difficult is it to film when your character is actually holding a mirror?
It's difficult. I generally try to ask as little technical stuff from actors as possible, so I can just let them act. But both Stacy and Audrey were really gracious in the number of technical things sometimes had to ask them to do. Hold the mirror exactly this way, or get the sun to bounce. We had to either get the sun to bounce off and hit specific things, and can be hard for anyone, but especially when you're 9 years old. That's
Yeah.
that's tricky. Yeah, and a few of the mirror shots are, I think, composited, like some of the close-ups and
Oh.
things that had to be very specific. A lot of things we did get in camera, but there's a handful of things that post magic.
Um, was that the most challenging part of filming this, or were there elements that posed more of a challenge?
I mean, I think I'd say that there's two things I would say were more challenging. One was that this was a micro budget feature, very small budget, therefore, very small crew, minimal resources, great location, but somewhat inaccessible. The woods. So we really had to pick locations based on where we had vehicle access, and the schedule was also very short. It was only 13 days of principal photography. And
Wow.
I, yeah, very short. I mean, I knew that we would need some pickup days, and the beauty of pickup days is, you already have a rough cut, so you can know kind of exactly what you need to shoot. So we did do, I think, 3 pickup days, and one of those pickup days is the other thing that I think was most challenging, which was the underwater scene. I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, I mean, the lake we tried upstate was too murky to really see anything underwater. It was cold. Everyone's wearing wetsuits, and we just didn't really get enough underwater footage. So we actually got the underwater shots later in a pool that we blacked out.
That's
Still challenging though.
that's a lot of work for a natural location.
Yeah.
Um, what was your favorite part of filming this movie?
It's not even a question I thought of how to answer. I think, um, bringing on my crew in camera, G&E lighting, it's all people I've trusted. They're all friends. Um, so I loved, working with them, and I always lean on my crew for support, and they were there for me. And and I'd say also working with such a small cast, it was really nice because I don't think I've ever been on a movie. It was just 2 people before, and yeah, we really got to know them. That was a wonderful experience.
That's awesome. Um, was there a shot that made it to the final cut that you are the most proud of, or that you really had to fight to keep?
Um, I don't think I had to fight to keep anything. I think Corey was very generous in honoring sort of what were the strongest images, because they ideally, I think we designed them to tell the story, to bring us through the character's journey. Um, but I proud of a lot of the shots, but I'm gonna go ahead and say the final shot, that over which the credits eventually roll. It's a very long take, and it was um it was very overcast, and we were a little bummed about that. And then as the shot keeps going, the sun came out, and the sunset we were hoping for happened. And it's just kind of nice to like have the entire, like 2 minutes of it, just be able to watch it happen, because it was very magical when it happened in person. We got very lucky.
Yeah, it's
And
always
it's all
nice. It's always nice when things work out like that.
there. Yeah.
Um, so this next question is just something I'm very curious about. Now that we are very optimistically coming out of COVID and not having to be as restricted as before, has that kind of, I guess, changed the way you approach your job? Like, do you have to continually modify things, or did you get to kind of go back to normal?
I think as far as COVID's concerned, we've mostly gone back to normal. And while we were in the height of COVID trying to figure out how can we have 40, 50, 100, 200 people on set, because that's what it takes to make a movie, we're figuring that out. A key grip of on a feature I was shooting in 2020 was like, all these attempts to redesign how a set runs, it's like we spent 100 years perfecting it. Like there's a reason that things run the way they run, because it's
Mm,
spent a century getting it right.
yeah,
So luckily, I think we've for the most part been able to go back to the ways that we have found, typically keep things running well.
that's good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Um, so what's next for you?
I've got a film that I shot recently called Thirsty Girl, which will be premiering at Provincetown and then Palm Springs festivals in June. I'm excited to go to those. And as you probably know, the writers' strike is happening, and the film industry is sort of unusually slow. So think a lot of folks are using that lull to film short films they've like had on the back burner for a long time, which is kind of nice that, it's like all passion projects. So yeah, so I'm shooting for a few directors this summer who are going to get the shorts done they've been dreaming about for a few years.
That's great. That's great. Um, okay. Those are kind of all the questions that I have for you. But is there anything that we didn't get to talk about that you would like to add?
Um, Great question. I think you covered a lot. I know I'm supposed to say where and when it will be available.
Good point. Good point. Where and when?
Esme, My Love will be available to stream on June 2nd, and I believe that will be on Apple, Amazon, Google Play, and Tubi to start.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah. Thanks so much,
Um,
Beth.
yeah, thank you for chatting. Again, I love the movie and I can't wait to see what you do next.